Hi, KC McCarthy here. Welcome to another video presentation. We're going to do something a little bit different today, and I think it's certainly in response to what we're all experiencing together all across the world. Everyone is certainly focused on the serious issue of the coronavirus. So many are actually quarantined in their homes. There's the usual distractions are not there. We have no sports. We can't go to the movies. We have to sit at home and really maybe think more deeply about our life, which is, I think, one of the silver linings in this dark cloud, is that this really affords us a time to think more deeply about the more serious issues of life. Of course, right now, many people are feeling fearful and are panicking, but now's the time to really get a grip on the deeper meaning of life, and that life is everlasting, and that there's nothing to fear but fear itself. So I put together a little video presentation, and I hope you like it. I hope it helps you in your situation, and I hope you can share it with others. I got my toilet paper, I got my hand wipes, I got my Lysol spray. I'm washing my hands constantly. I'm not shaking hands, and I'm not touching my face. Why does it seem so many are feeling this ceaseless dread, a dread that keeps building and building, a dread that compels us to another run to the local grocer and join the frantic hordes, hoarding more toilet paper, more Lysol, more hand wipes? Have we gone mad? Well, yes, we have. And it should behoove us to step back and analyze the genetic code of our out-of-control dread, as much as the Center for Disease Control presently is seeking to understand the fundamentals of the coronavirus. Whereas the coronavirus is manifesting a huge burden upon physical health, the other subsequent disease, the disease known as fear, is presently manifesting an equally heavy burden upon our soul. Fortunately, for the disease of fear, a vaccine is readily available and easily distributed. More on that later. Because before we can know the cure, we must have a clear discovery of the elements of the disease. The first and most obvious element of the dread that presently permeates society is caused by the fear of death itself. Humans have always feared death. Fear of death resides in the deepest crevices of our psyche. There have been various ways that people have dealt with the fear of death. Typically, the instinctive and secular way for people to deal with death is to basically just proceed upon a path of denial. It is especially so for the media-driven popular culture of today. Death isn't on the radar screen. The popular culture only promotes the here and now and the prospects for immediate gratification. However, when death encroaches upon our sphere of denial, such as in the case of the death of a loved one or a well-known figure, we suddenly profess our shock and declare unequivocally that death is a tragic event that should have never taken place. Many will mourn at the funeral of the deceased and speak in muted tones, referring to the deceased in past tense terms. Bob was a stand-up guy. Was? Why do we do that? In a strange way, it's probably an attempt to somehow cordon ourselves safely within our cocoon of denial about death. We keep death at arm's length, deeming it to be an awful thing that only happens to the other guy, the poor thing. And it will never, of course, happen to me. When my father passed away many years ago, I was shaken into a new consciousness about death, and also how the popular culture seems to be so uncomfortable with the topic of death. The hospital in which my father had died had its ICU on the top floor. It was a small rural hospital in North Carolina. To transfer his body to the morgue, the nurse and I had to take the only elevator to the basement where the morgue was located. This was also the only elevator in the whole hospital. So as we stopped on each floor with my father's body in the elevator, the doors would open and new passengers would, be distracted in various conversations or reading materials, would proceed to embark. It was truly amazing to see their sudden recognition of who else was in the elevator, their shocked and flustered expressions, and the quick retreats that ensued on every floor. I never knew people could walk backwards so fast, saying things like, "I'll take the next one, thanks." Today's corona pandemic and the constant media drumbeat about the growing number of dead and dying challenges our carefully honed denial mechanisms. It's like we've mistakenly got on the elevator to the morgue. The doors closed shut behind us, and we're on a painfully slow ride of indeterminable length, while the media inculcates the warning that the number of people annihilated by death is sure to rise. Everything that usually we could distract ourselves with has been removed. No sports to watch, no restaurants or nightclubs to frequent. We can't even go to church. We just hear the sound of the angel of death scratching at our door. Are we being tortured? What are we to do in such an unexpected circumstance? There's no recourse except to get a grip on the full measure of life. Getting a grip always entails facing harsh realities and making tough decisions, but knowing deep down, we got this. We can do this. If you're beginning to feel the walls of dread closing in upon you, it's a pretty good indication that your mechanism of denial is crumbling. It's time to get real. But that's a good thing, because now you can face the reality of death and ask yourself some very honest and necessary questions about it. And there's questions that everyone should ask. And one of them is to understand, is death the complete annihilation of our existence? If it were so, how is it that we can not only conceive of eternity, but also long for it more than anything? No one wants to die. Even atheists wish to live forever. If life ends in death, and is the complete annihilation of our existence, then wouldn't life be rather meaningless? Almost a cruel and sick joke imposed upon those who long for life so deeply. If that were the case, shouldn't our default setting then be one of bitterness and blame for having to live a life of denial to assuage the dread of our inevitable impending death? On the other hand, if there is a path to eternal life, could there be a more precious gift? Could there be a greater joy produced for having received it? Wouldn't the life of bitterness and blame be suddenly washed away in a tidal wave of blessing and be transformed into a life of gratitude towards a most benevolent Creator? This was the question that Harrison O'Keefe faced in May of 2012. He was the head cook on a tugboat with a crew of 12 that, with 2 other tugboats, were pulling an oil tanker off the coast of Nigeria. In the dead of night, while the crew slept, the tugboat suddenly lurched forward, quickly capsized, and sunk, taking the entire crew to the bottom. By some miracle, although the ship rested upside down on the sea bottom, some 100 feet below the surface, O'Keefe found a pocket of air. He was alone, the only survivor, at the bottom of the sea in total darkness. What would you have done if you found yourself in such a predicament? Wouldn't panic and dread seem to be a most reasonable response? Wouldn't it seem more normal to feel anger, bitterness, and blame for this woeful state that had befallen you through no fault of your own? Harrison O'Keefe felt nothing of the sort, and instead conducted himself in an entirely different manner. Knowing about his story, especially now, can serve as an important guidepost for us. It is a shining example as we face our own personal life crisis with the threat of the coronavirus pandemic all around us. As the temperature dropped to near freezing in his air bubble, O'Keefe, dressed only in boxer shorts, recited the psalms that his wife had texted to him each night before he went to bed. One particular psalm, sometimes referred to as the prayer for deliverance, was closest to his heart. It was the last psalm his wife had texted him the night his ship had sunk. It said, "O God, by your name, save me. The Lord sustains my life." O'Keefe kept faith with the psalms he recited and promised to God to give thanks in your name, O Lord. It is such a mind of faith that awakens us to the promise that the death of the body is not the annihilation of a person's existence. The mind of faith perceives opportunity, even in the darkest hour, while the mind of unfaith only perceives the difficulties and the most dreaded outcome. It is the faithful mind that recognizes that life can continue everlastingly. It is one of the reasons that the story of Jesus has been so compelling. Jesus conquered death. Because of such faith, Harrison O'Keefe did not panic, and he remained calm throughout his entire ordeal. In fact, because of that, he was able to survive for 72 hours until he was finally rescued. In such a calm state, he used less oxygen and maintained carbon dioxide at manageable low levels. Had he been in a panic state, his heart rate would have increased, as then would his breathing rate. It would have been one more sad example of fear causing the very outcome that is dreaded. It is this insidious nature of inordinate fear, and it is what, no doubt, inspired Franklin Roosevelt to remind us during another world crisis, we have nothing to fear but fear itself. In these troubled times, let us remember the word of Psalm 32:7, which says, "You are my hiding place. You will protect me from trouble and surround me with the songs of deliverance." Let us today be reminded of that fact as we hold high the example of Harrison O'Keefe, a true champion of courageous faith in the protective hand of God's deliverance. Let's be prepared and do all we can to fight the coronavirus. But above all, let's keep the faith and do not panic.